The Cannabis Business Coach.
Hi, Mike Z here, author of the Cannabis Business Book, and you're listening to the Cannabis Business Coach podcast, where I chat with and coach the highest performing entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry.
Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. The Cannabis Business Coach.
Hi, Mike Z here, and today I'm so excited to have David Hess, the president of Trust Capital, as my guest on the Cannabis Business Coach podcast. David, you've been investing in the industry for many years now, and I'm excited to pick your brain and share your insights. And thank you for being here. If you don't mind, would you introduce yourself to the folks watching and listening?
Sure, Mike. Thanks for having me. My name is David Hess. I am the co-founder and president of Trust Capital. Trust Capital is a boutique investment firm located in New York City, and we invest strictly in the cannabis space and manage investments for ourselves, for high net worth individuals, some family offices, and some small institutional capital as well. Again, strictly in the cannabis space. We're opportunistic. We've got investments in pretty much, I wouldn't say every sector, but most sectors and subsectors across the industry. And that's a little bit about Trust.
Amazing. Awesome. And David, tell us, how did you decide, or why did you decide to enter the legal cannabis industry?
So that is a great question. All right, so I don't know if many of your listeners know, but I'm sure some do. I'm originally from LA, and we legalized cannabis back in '96. In fact, as a senior in high school, right, I graduated in '95, '96 was my senior year, and so what cooler job would there be other than going to get signatures for Prop 215? It was 50 cents a signature, but come on, nothing cooler than telling your friends that's what you do, right? And making some extra money that way. So, and then lo and behold, it passed, right? And so medical cannabis for me wasn't foreign, the way it is to some today. But the passion itself really stems from my experience with cancer. I'm in New York now because in 2000, I was diagnosed with synovial sarcoma. And then I was diagnosed again shortly within a 2-year period, just before the 2-year anniversary, with a local recurrence. And both times I was in Sloan Kettering, pretty much because they were the only ones that were giving me a shot at living. Most oncologists that we found were essentially saying, we're going to make you comfortable, giving me places for hospice, essentially. And I said, let's keep looking. We found a couple of oncologists at Sloan Kettering. Believe it or not, there were quite a few at Sloan Kettering that were saying the same thing. But there were a few. Luckily, I got to them, and here I am. Now, the way the story goes is my second time around, right? I was in really bad shape. And it got to the point where I was an inpatient for the better portion of a year. Maybe I would be home for 3 or 4 days out of the month. I'd become neutropenic and end up back in the hospital. And so it was really, really intense. And for the first round or two, it wasn't a big deal in terms of medicating with cannabis. Friends would come by, family would come by. And again, this wasn't taboo for me or my family, right? In fact, I had family members that were bringing cannabis for me. I couldn't get it on my own. And so there I was standing outside of Sloan Kettering with my pole, and no one's saying anything to me, right? It got to the point though where I couldn't get out of bed. So I'm literally, going through these rounds of chemo, and people would come by and let's go outside, let's go downstairs. I would try, and I physically couldn't make it out of bed. And I looked at my oncologist one day and I said, I'm done. I said, when you told me that this chemo was likely going to kill me before the cancer would, I thought, all right, I'm going to sign my name to that because I have to, but there's no way you're actually going to kill me, right? Now I believe you, and it feels more like suicide. So I don't want to have any part of this. and someone handed me an article from, I think it was Time Magazine. Again, this is like back in 2002, on Marinol. And I said to the oncologist, I said, almost defiantly, I like flung it at him. And I said, here, I said, write me a prescription for Marinol and I'll stay. And he looks at it and he says, we haven't prescribed Marinol yet, but it's not going to hurt you. So we're going to go ahead and do that for you. So, all right. And, they didn't have it at the pharmacy in-house at Sloan. They had to go out and find it in Manhattan. One pharmacy had it and they brought it back. And within an hour, I remember clearly, I was going for an MRI and I'm telling jokes and I'm having a great time. It was, best way to compare it for me was like a really good edible. And, I understand now, learning more and more about Marinol and hearing stories, that the efficacy isn't quite there for everybody, but luckily it was there for me. And it was just, like I said, a really good edible. And I would be calling my friends and it was Monday, right? And I would say, it's Monday night, it's football, bring the wings. And they would say, bring the wings? Monday Night Football, what are you talking about? I visited you yesterday and you had like blood coming out of your ears and you were like pale as a ghost and you looked like you were on your deathbed. And I said, well, nothing's changed. Just my attitude has changed, and so and my appetite, right? And so they came around and the issue really became, I was on a pediatric floor because I was diagnosed with synovial sarcoma, and it usually presents itself in adolescence. And so there I was as a 22-year-old on a pediatric floor, and at Sloan Kettering, it's not a private room unless it really, really needs to be, which at times I was. But for the most part, I had a roommate, and my roommates were 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and like I kind of get choked up every time I think about it. And plural roommates, because they wouldn't stick around too long. And it wasn't because they were going home. They were going someplace else. And at night, it was horrible, right? I mean, kids were crying and, there I was watching, football or watching movie and having munchies and feeling like myself. And here they were suffering. And I said to myself, can I just slip them one of my Marinols? When they come in next time, maybe I won't take it and give one to my buddy over here. Or, does it work for children? Why does it work? Why am I feeling this way? And by nature, I'm a very curious person. And so from that point forward, I wanted to learn everything I could about cannabis. Again, coming from Los Angeles, being, a part of, a small part of, getting, some signatures for Prop 215 to get it passed. I mean, I understood what medical cannabis was. I had family and friends that were actually growing and cultivating and distributing cannabis under the new California laws. And so I understood, again, what medical cannabis, what the term meant. But to me, it was sort of like a joke. We weren't, no one was growing it any differently. There weren't any specific strains. No one really knew much. Certainly no one strain was given for one specific symptom. And that just wasn't happening back then, right? We were just growing and not getting arrested for it if you were lucky, right? So, I wanted to understand, is there really medical value? Here I was a patient feeling better. Now, again, I wasn't cured, but I was feeling better, and it enabled me to continue my chemo. And so I started reaching out, as soon as I got better, I started reaching out to people like Ethan Russo, and he was awesome picking up the phone, and believe it or not, emailing Raphael Mechoulam and really getting answers in early 2000s, and understanding there was an endocannabinoid system, and it wasn't just cannabinoids, there were terpenes and other molecules in the plant that were providing benefit. And so to me, going forward, I wanted to really, provide an credibility for the plant and legitimacy in any way I could. Now, so that's really, I guess, the moment, to answer that question. A little bit of a winded answer, but to answer the question, it's that's really what, the moment I decided I'm really going to devote myself, to cannabis plant, really, and everything that goes into that. On the investing side, that didn't happen really until closer to like 2010, 2011. So at that time, I had, I'd gotten better, staying in New York, still in New York, because I had to go back and still have to go back periodically to Sloan to get checked. But I ended up manufacturing reflective safety apparel. We were doing that for pets at first, and joggers. So if you're walking your dog, your dog could have a reflective collar. You could have something reflective on you, so you don't get hit by a car early in the morning or late at night, or God forbid, if your dog were to get loose, your dog doesn't get hit because your dog is short, whatever it may be. And then suddenly I'm getting orders like FOB, some base out in like Kandahar, and I'm like, oh, are they walking their dog out there? Are there, and then I start Googling and I see that everybody in every branch of the military has to have these reflective belts that I was selling. They were just called reflective PT belts. And I just changed the packaging. I was selling them for considerably less than most others. And so I was doing that for a little while. And then in 2010, like I said, 6 licenses, as you're, I think, aware of, were awarded to in New Jersey. And there I was in New York. So the grower for that project calls me one day and says, they're having some trouble bringing in the funds and bringing in the expertise. And I know that that's something that you could probably do pretty quickly. And so, and he'd been hearing me for years, right, talking about, legitimacy of cannabis and wanting to do it right, and also knew what was going back in, what I was doing in LA and, in California and, Northern California and Southern California. And it's kind of, again, grayish. And again, I was always talking about one day there was going to be this, legitimate cannabis industry. And he basically said, here's your chance. And so I brought in a friend that had the right background for that project. And I mean, it was in New Jersey. It was, under the noses of pharmaceutical and biotech industry. And we weren't going to put up a cultivation that, looked like a basement grow, right? As a lot of those grows were looking early on in this new cannabis era, right? We wanted it to look more automated, more professional, more medically, facing. And so that's what we did, and spent probably quite a bit too much money on that. But that was, once that was done, I had a bunch of friends come out of the woodwork and say, why didn't you tap me for that project, for funding at least? I said, don't worry, there are plenty of other projects going on outside of New Jersey. I will go ahead and find those for you. And that's what set me off. And luckily, because my network at that point was in California, and it's a very small network in Colorado, but it was primarily in California. And so luckily for me at that point, that's when these conferences were just starting, like NCIA, just starting. And so, joined, and became a member of whatever association was starting up that month or that year, and would go to as many conferences as I could, and really grew with the nucleus of the industry. I remember when MJ Biz, they had like a couple hundred people, like a few tables with tablecloths and people putting their wares out, and some pamphlets about what their company's all about, nothing like it looks like today. And just kind of grew with the industry. And once I started collecting deals, and I say that because my partner Asher laughs a lot, and and says at the beginning he used to call me like the bottleneck, really, because what happened was I had all these friends that want and business associates that wanted to invest in cannabis, and so the money was on the sidelines and waiting. And I was going and kicking tires and seeing all these opportunities. Primarily at that point, they were cultivations, but again, I knew a lot about cultivations. So it was nice to go and diligence those, and I had a clear understanding of what I was seeing. So that wasn't the problem. The problem is, as you've heard, I don't have a background in finance. And I was getting concerned that, okay, if I was putting up my capital, or, one buddy, two friends, we were putting up some capital for something very different than if I was going to start really, really taking in considerable amounts of investment dollars from, a larger network of people. And then, I really wanted it to look like any other investment firm on Wall Street for any other sector. That was kind of like my idea back then. And so, fortunate for me, I actually it was two friends that recommended I speak with Asher. And he's somebody that was on Wall Street for a little over a decade at the time, investing a lot of his own money in private equity at the time. And I said to him, would you want to start this with me? And he's somebody that, is an impact investor and by nature wants to do well by doing good. And so, yeah, he joined me, and this was right around 2013. So I had a couple of years before it was Tress. It was actually Lincoln Health Group for a minute. I just figured Abraham Lincoln, no one's going to have a problem with that, and health, right? That's why, again, this was like in the early days. I wasn't going to call it Canna anything, I wanted to, have bank accounts. And so, that's what I called it. But yeah, so we, once Asher came in, Asher Tropy is his last name, and my last name being Hess, we joined them and formed Tress in 2000. And so it's not trees, some people call it trees, but it's Tress in 2013. And at that point, I had already been going to a bunch of the conferences, building up the network. And so I had relationships with, for example, the guys at that time when they were from Leafly, and they were just getting ready to start their new venture called Headset. They had sold to Privateer, and they needed, to wait until they were able to go ahead and do that. And then, so once they were able to, we wanted to be a part of that. And we've been part of the rounds, subsequent rounds since then. And, it wasn't the thesis at that point to start investing in tech or ancillary per se. It was more, infrastructure and what we were calling really the legs of the industry. I wanted to ensure that if we were going to put money into deals, granted, I felt that, all right, if we put it into, 10 different cultivations, there's a strong likelihood that we'd see a return. But how would that advance the industry as a whole? And so early on, I just didn't feel right, if that makes sense. And so for me, I wanted to establish something stronger, something more stable that could help the industry. And that if the industry would succeed, so would the operation. And we invested in companies, for example, like SC Labs early on. Why? Going back to my years manufacturing reflective safety apparel, I was selling to places like Walmart, for example, and Walmart wouldn't allow anything through their doors without first being, third-party tested. And we had quite a few people in the network that wanted to invest, and they're from the diamond industry. Same thing, right? A diamond. What makes one diamond, worth $1 million and the other is worth $10,000? Not much to the naked eye, right? You really need to send it to a third-party lab in order to really get that assurance that that's the value and that's what's there. How do you know it's real and not a machine-made diamond, for example? And so we invested early on in what we felt was the strongest testing lab in the space. And again, through the network that I had built over the years, SC Labs has been testing cannabis way before the laws demanded it in 2018 in California. I mean, they were the number one testing facility, out in California, when it was, really just consumer driven, right? And they had a reputation for not, I mean, there were a couple of labs, but, some of the other labs were sort of pay to play, and they had built their reputation on, we're not going to do that, but what we will do is help you figure out why it failed, and let's bring it back, and let's get it going. No, a lot of times people weren't failing on purpose, right? There's a whole variety of reasons why people are failing, and a lot of times it's not even because of what they're doing, right? It could be that the clone that they had originally started from, right, was not a great clone. And so it was really helping them understand why they failed and how to do better, which we really liked. And we invested in companies like Baker, which is now part of Tilt. Again, right when they were, I mean, they're still pretty young guys, but, just a couple of, wide-eyed young guys coming out of New Jersey to Colorado to put together what at that point started as like the sales force of the cannabis industry. And again, same thing, right? Anything that had to do at that point with data, we understood that, if Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, anybody wants to put out a new product, they don't do it based on a gut feeling that, someone at the C-level has, right? Or anyone else has. It's based on data, right? And so we knew that was going to happen sooner or later in the industry. And certainly we were validated when Nielsen themselves made an investment into Headset, right? And so, just really about, furthering the credibility of the plant and making it more approachable for people. And so we've got an investment, for example, in a company, Infusion Biosciences, that their extraction IP actually creates a water-soluble product without any emulsification, without any any nano technology involved. I mean, it is 100% water soluble from the get-go and strain specific, right? And so that for me was revolutionary and a game changer when I saw it, again, because it became approachable, whether you're consuming for recreational purposes, or you've got a migraine, right? In either scenario, you're not looking to medicate or use a product in order to feel it an hour or two later and then not know when that feeling, good or bad, was going to subside. An edible, right, wasn't, not knowing when it was going to end, and if it started an hour or two later, for me, I was used to that, but I understood that wasn't scalable. And so when I had this product, and fortunately I was one of the first to try their sample, and again, this came out of IP used for a cholesterol medicine like 30 years ago, where they had a plant that was a lipid, and they wanted to create a water soluble medicine because of the way that we metabolize these products. It needed to be water soluble for a variety of reasons, and he tried it using the cannabis plant and didn't even know what he had, right? And I was one of the first people. He said, "Here, try this," I'll try it. And it was literally, as I'm sipping it, I'm starting to feel the effects. And within an hour, it was completely out of my system. And I started giving it to some people that were going through chemo, for example. And an uncle of mine was going through chemo specifically at the time, and he had a tremendous amount of mucus, right? And would always have a tissue box with him. And so I gave him a sip of this. For 45 minutes, he did not touch a tissue. And it started immediately. He drank it with immediately no tissues. And 45 minutes later, the tissue box came out and started taking it. And I noticed it, and I said, "Here, take another sip." Took another sip, and I'm telling you, no mucus. And I pushed the golden buzzer, as they say on that one, and it was a game changer. They're still developing product out of that, but again, that's what drives my passion. It's how do we bring cannabis to the masses, to everybody, because that's what it's about. That's how we're going to create that credibility and legitimacy. It's not just for medical patients. It's not just for rec users. It's for everybody. I tell people that, similar to maybe food or music, those are the only two I really could think of. You don't need to speak the same language as the other person. You don't need to have the same ideology as the other person. You share cannabis with somebody and you can have, a fantastic experience unlike any other. And again, maybe food does that, maybe music. And so, yeah, that's really what drives my passion. So it's, would I love to find and invest in a cure for cancer one day? Absolutely. But, and a lot of people maybe expect that of me, being that, that's largely the impetus that drives me into this industry. But the reality is it's not just on the medical side. I was a rec user first, right? So it's for everybody. And yeah, so long answer again, I apologize, but I'm really passionate about this, which I think is absolutely necessary for anybody that wants to be in this industry, because it's a roller coaster. And if you're not passion driven, it's not for you.
Wow. David, thank you so much for all that, man. Hearing your story, I've heard bits of it before, but to go more in depth, and I never knew that bit about you graduating high school and working on getting signatures. And so that's incredible how it, to the evolution of it all. And wow, just hearing everything you had to endure personally battling cancer, and having cannabis be a strong ally in that fight and propelling you to ask those questions of, well, why does this work? How come, I have on a smaller scale a similar experience where, I talk about in the book where I had this freak accident, and for months I was bedridden and I had to rest up to be able to, protect my arm. And, I'd been a pothead before, and I use that as a term of endearment, and I always thought medical cannabis was some joke, that was just like something that, some excuse to get it legalized or whatever. But actually in that experience, I used it for pain management, to do my physical therapy and to be able, and also just for some joy, because I was, 23 years old and bedridden and couldn't go do anything for several months. And, it was the one bright spot in my day was when my friends would come by and we would have some pot and hang out. And, for a little while I felt normal and like myself again. But anyway, wow. And it was actually that experience that led me to question and to start thinking about, well, wait a second, what's going on here? Because before I was just a totally ignorant consumer. And, that whole accident and recovery, that whole situation made me ask not only questions about cannabis, but also, the kind of deeper existential questions of like, why did this happen to me? Why did I survive? What am I doing here? And I can only imagine that, you had a similar experience in, battling this difficult form of cancer that several oncologists wrote you off. And, yet all these years later, here you are. So, I'm curious, what's it like, kind of two-part question. What's it like being David Hess today? And I'm interested, on the micro level, like what's the day-to-day of a cannabis investor, for the audience, and more for my own curiosity, really. I'm wondering, just kind of in the bigger scheme of things, I would love to hear about that kind of existential questioning that maybe you went through.
So many years ago, my father, as a senior in high school, fell off a cliff and should have it all, should have been dead. Woke up in the hospital a few days later, should have been dead. Fast forward about a year and a half, he's backpacking through Europe and a little bit through the Middle East, and has a stopover through Israel. Not religious whatsoever, grew up in Palos Verdes, California, Jewish, but completely secular. And he's walking in the old city of Jerusalem, and an old rabbi, with the big white beard, stops him, and they get into the whole story. And he tells my father, or he asks my father, would you like to stay and learn about God? And so my father says to him, God and I are like this. And he says, what do you mean God and you are like that? And he told him the whole story, right? And so the rabbi looked at my father and he said, who do you think pushed you off, right? And so from that point on, and my father is this like deep thinker, and maybe that's something that birthed it within me. I bet actually I'm on both sides of my family, but so, I think about that a lot, right? Why did I get cancer? What was the reason for pushing me, off of that cliff, right? And I think I'm still learning the answers, right? And it's almost like every time I hear a story like the story you just told me, right, about your experience, or anyone else I meet that had a positive experience with cannabis, sometimes I think that's why I'm still here. I don't know. I think we're still playing out, it happened, for me when I was young. I've got 4 great kids right now, an awesome wife, and maybe that's why I'm still here. I often joke, I used to think of myself as like a cat with 9 lives. Cancer wasn't it. I've been in some pretty gnarly accidents. I flipped over in cars, multiple flips, where I should have not survived, and just a variety of other accidents in life. But I'm still here. I'm still kicking. And it's part of what makes up the resilience of who I am, and I think that's part of what defines me almost, is that resilience. And that has something to do with it, and getting to the day to day, super busy. Maybe busier than I need to be sometimes. Maybe we'll get to that in the coaching section of this. But it starts early and ends real late, because I'm on the East Coast and we're global. So we're looking at opportunities and doing diligence and opportunities in Israel, in Europe, and in those time zones, right? And we're also staying up, late, because I'm speaking a lot to the West Coast, right? So it's a long, long day. And if I wasn't as passionate as I was, it almost doesn't feel like work, if that makes sense. I put in a tremendous amount of hours, but it's just what I do, if that makes sense. It's almost like breathing. It's hard to explain, but it just, that's what I do. And so it would be, one more granular level, right? It's emails. We're getting a lot of deal flow inbound, and it's not because there's some magic there, right? Anyone that's does their homework on cannabis investors, there are maybe a few hundred. It's not that hard to find us, and so we do get a lot of inbound deals, and so that a lot of times that comes through me, and we'll take a look at that. And a lot of times I'm doing diligence or looking at deals before they're even funding rounds are announced. Okay, and the way it's, again, not magic. If someone had a round that they raised 2 years ago, right, they're likely going to be raising another round soon, right? And so if they raised a round 6 months ago, what I'll do is I'll go to my calendar, and in a year and a half from now, I'll make a little marker and I'll say, reach out to that company and see if they're raising at that time. And I'll follow those companies and just lightly keep track of things like employee size and just certain KPIs that, that we look for. So a lot of the day is coming up with those KPIs, and it's fluid, right? And so not all of them are fluid, but some are. And so we're adding and sort of tweaking all the time and trying to create some kind of a template so it becomes, somewhat easier. But the reality is it might be somewhat easy to weed out, once you have like a good thesis as to what you're investing in. If you were, it's not us because we do touch the plant, but if you were, for example, only doing ancillary, someone comes to you with a cultivation, boom, you don't even look at that, right? But for us, we are opportunistic. We are looking at most deals, but now I'm looking less at seed stage, for example. So I'll take the inbound because, again, I want to watch that, and knowing when that round closed, we potentially like to be a part of the next round once there's a little bit more traction, and maybe we want to even support without capital, right? And support that traction up until the time where we can invest. That happens a lot as well. So identifying companies within each sector is something that I spend a lot of time on, and just, really building out the landscape within each sector, and understanding not just who the number one guy is or the number 20 girl is, it's who's number 100. I really want to know everybody, and a lot of times it's also me reaching out on LinkedIn, and I would bet that everybody, or pretty much everybody listening to this podcast, is LinkedIn with me. And again, that's not an accident. I do a lot of outbound because I want to see what they're putting out, and I want them to benefit from, news that I'm sharing as well. And a lot of times, like, for example, in a few days, or now it's pretty often with Zoom, we do these, pitch sessions, right? I would love to be able to share with my LinkedIn family, my LinkedIn network, when there's another another pitch session, whether they're looking for capital or whether they're just looking for guidance. It's just a great way to share, what's going on. And so if there's no, sometimes people don't want to accept a LinkedIn connection. I don't think that's wise. I mean, if they're not in your industry and it's something that, that's different. But I'm talking about somebody in your industry, does what you're doing, chances are you're going to find value. There's an old Jewish proverb, you find, who's the wise one? Who learns from his fellow, right, man? And that's what we're all about. Be open to learning from others, and hopefully others will be, open to learning from you. So that's what I do. I do a lot of networking throughout the day, a lot of phone calls throughout the day, a lot of webinars, podcasts, and so it's all cannabis related. That's for sure. And I spend a few minutes eating and drinking, and a few minutes exercising, which is something that I've been much better at lately, because I got to the point where I wasn't anymore. I was just like sitting in this chair way too much, and so especially with the lack of travel, it started to really become apparent that I was sitting in this chair too much, because at least I would get, every week or two I'd be on a plane going somewhere and running around. So exercise is really, really important. So started rollerblading with my dog, and doing that. I do that every night, and then I get back to work. I mean, I'll take a few hours to relax, obviously, but I mean, if you call me or text me or email me at 2 or 3 in the morning, no joke, there's a good chance I'll be up and might even respond. So
Nice.
It's just what I do.
Amazing. Awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll get on some more flights soon. That's usually where I caught up on sleep. I see a lot of people working on flights. That's where I caught up on sleep.
That's funny. That's funny. David, I want to ask you, since you mentioned earlier about the importance of data, and I'm curious if you can give me just some high-level data points about, like, how many deals you see a year, and how many of those deals do you actually pursue in a meaningful way, or actually end up placing capital in, or just some kind of metrics around um, you and Tress.
Okay, so we're seeing in the thousands, right? And the reason why, if that sounds high, right? But I'm including the phone calls, the emails where someone calls up and says, I've got X acres of land and I'm pursuing a license. Can you help? Right? So if you're including those, thousands a year, okay? And we're not doing diligence on those, right? That is, asking myself, am I taking calls from random people that, have X land somewhere, and am I investing in it? Likely not. And historically we haven't. And so that's been helpful for me to slowly, I still want to, one way or the other, get back to that person if I can. But yeah, so, it's a lot. I would say in terms of how many deals we actually, start the diligence process on, that's more like in the hundreds, right? And then it's generally about, I would say, 5 to 10 a week that I really spend some time on. And I'll speak with, some of the C-level execs, getting to know more than just what I'm seeing on a deck or seeing, in a deal room, really want to understand if it's a culture fit, et cetera. And that's something that I try and explain to entrepreneurs a lot, and investors, right? Is that, and similar to a marriage, right? If a male has a heartbeat or someone has a heartbeat, right? And someone else has a heartbeat, that doesn't mean you put them together, right? That doesn't work. And similar with investment and the operator, right? It's depending on the size of the investment, but if it's significant size, which we typically, are allocating, it's a lot like a marriage, right? And so you need to do your homework on not just the numbers, but on the people. And it's more than just, would you go to a ball game with them and have a beer with them? It's a lot more than that. And so, yeah, about, I would say 10, about 10 to a dozen or so every week, that we're looking at and taking notes on. And again, if it's not for now, those notes don't go bad, right? I mean, I'll keep in touch with a lot of them. And a lot of times what we'll do is, because we've got sort of this bird's eye view, and rightfully so, a lot of the operators got their blinders on, right? What I'll do is I'll be able to sometimes say, hey, what would be a great, collaboration effort would be between, you and you, right? And put those two together. I'm doing that a lot. And again, it's for the benefit of the industry. It's for the benefit of the cannabis community. If we're going to do something, more extensive, then that's done through solutions. But again, a lot of times it's not even, and sometimes it's not even asked. It's a lot of times it's proactively. I'll text someone and say, have you ever thought about reaching out to so-and-so? Might be a good fit for both of you, a win-win, something I like to see a lot of, if we can. And so, yeah, I would say about 10 or so. In terms of how many deals we do a year, historically it's been 1 or 2 a year. And it's not, we don't have a fund where we have to allocate by a certain time. And I think that's to our advantage, right? Because, for example, last year, we were seeing, and it's gotten better this year, we were seeing some great opportunities, right? But just way overpriced. And you don't do that in real life, right? If if someone wanted to give you a pair of shoes that you just really love, right? But was going to charge you like 22 times what they thought the value of those shoes were going to be in 2 years from now, right? You look at that person like they're nuts, right? And I get it. That's how it's done. I'm learning, right? That's how it's done in finance a little bit, right? Depending on the sector. But, it's, come on, right? And we saw a lot of pushback over the past year. So, it's not a numbers game per se that we're going to invest 1 or 2. We invest in an opportunity that we feel we can add benefit, to those operators and to that opportunity, and vice versa, right? Maybe it's fits what one of our investors or ourselves, what we're passionate about and what we think we can add value to. Or where, if we have a couple of companies or a company in the portfolio that could benefit from having this other company in the portfolio, maybe that's why we'll make an investment or start getting to know that company better. And so it's not really we have to do 1 or 4 or 7 deals a year. It's what makes sense to us, right? And I'd love to do more, so that's why we love to help entrepreneurs make sense of it, so that whether it's us or other investors, and a lot of these operators are new, similar to how I was, right? A lot of these operators are new to the VC world, new to the private equity world, new to to bringing in capital outside of maybe family and friends. And when that happens, it's a whole nother ballgame. Everything from governance to forming a board, and I mean, it's a whole nother world. And operators should be ready for that if they're bringing on outside capital like that, sophisticated capital. I mean, they're likely going to reap the rewards, but they need to be ready for that, and vice versa, right? Sometimes you have an investor that really doesn't do their homework on a particular sector. Or, Mark, for example, I listened to his podcast, right, from Urban Grow, and it was just getting frustrated because some investors just don't understand how much it takes to put in. And yeah, I get it, right? And we see that a lot as well. And investors really need to understand the sector, understand the opportunity. And if they're not going to be able to do the diligence themselves or put in the time, come to Trust, come to someone like a Trust. And again, there are a number of us that have been spending years in this space supporting investors, ensuring that they target the right opportunity. And it's not just about the economics, trust me, it's not. And vice versa, right? So hopefully, we continue to see good marriages and good, good deals out there. Again, we're starting to see a lot more of that. And, that's really nice to see. Because again, that's just going to add more credibility, and legitimacy, right?
Let me ask you this, David. What's in your opinion, a counterintuitive truth about cannabis investing? So what's something that a lot of people think is like this, but actually it's like that?
First question I get when people ask, what do you do? And I invest in cannabis, automatically assume I'm invested in a cultivation. That's number one, right? And I can procure them some cannabis. And maybe I can, maybe I can't, but it's certainly not going to be, from a cultivation that we're associated. It doesn't happen like that, right? So that's one of them. Number two is that if you invest in cannabis, you're going to make money, right? Far from that. I think, unfortunately, a lot of retail investors that didn't go through a trust, or some of our friends in the industry learned that the hard way, right? And to my point earlier, the industry is sort of suffering as a result. So did we bring that on ourselves by not doing the homework? You know what I mean? So, and I get it, when you list and you do it on certain exchanges, I mean, those are the types of investors that are going to come in, but it's a cycle. And I think a lot of people might have known that this might have happened and, or was going to happen. And hopefully we don't do it again. It's so important that, investors understand that this is very, very complicated. And people say, well, it's weed, it's easy, it's a plant. It's not. And whether it's the regulations or, 280E if you're in retail, I mean, there's so much that you have to know. Even if you're choosing an attorney, a lot of times, we'll look at deals, look at opportunities, and I'll ask, who's your attorney? And it's some attorney that's not in their state, not in their region. And I wonder, why do you count on that attorney? How is that attorney going to know the day-to-day of what's going on in your county, which is, especially if it's, let's say, California, very likely differs from the county next door, right? I'd really like, you as an operator to have local counsel or someone that's hyper vigilant, right? With local laws, and so it's complicated. It's really complicated. And so I would say that's the one and two, the two biggest misnomers about cannabis investing.
Awesome.
Oh,
And
you know what? And the third, here's a big one. I gotta say it. And this happened, and you can say I'm passionate about this too. You know, early on, it happened a lot more. More than it's happening now. But a lot of investors assumed that cannabis operators were, drug dealers, gangbangers, and just bad people, right? And that they couldn't be more wrong, more incorrect. I mean, it's some of the greatest people, some of the warmest community that you'll ever meet. So genuine about what you're doing. And again, it's not everybody, but at its core, right? That's what I've come up. That's who I've met, and that's who I surround myself with. And there are a lot that I surround myself with. So it's a lot of people, right? That are that way. Yeah, we're not bad people. And if an investor thinks that they're going to invest in cannabis, right, and that they still have that in their head, right, that when they close their eyes and they think of cannabis, they think of illegal activity and the illicit market and all these, just don't invest, please. This is not for you. Look at YouTube and see who's involved in the industry, listen to some podcasts, see who's come from outside industries into cannabis, learn about the decades and decades of people that have really, risked everything, right, for cannabis. And why? Ask yourselves why. They're not bad people. Again, there's bad apples in every bunch, but as a whole, if that's how you think, and early on, I'm not going to mention names, of course, but earlier on, there were some investors that I would see at several of those cannabis conventions. So they were looking at cannabis deals, and the way they would talk about the operators, I mean, I literally look at them, shake their hand, and walk away. The second they would say, something, just despairingly about somebody in the industry like that, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
yeah.
And I'm happy a lot of those guys are no longer in the industry, no longer investing in the industry.
What are you most excited about in the industry right now, or for the future of the industry?
What am I most excited about? It's a very good question. I think accessibility is getting better. I think we're seeing, for example, we talked about like water solubility before, and I wasn't knocking any nano encapsulation or anyone that's emulsifying or anything like that. That was just the process that Infusion Biosciences does. But the fact that we're thinking about how can we make it more approachable for people? How can we make it stay on a shelf longer? How can we make it more stable? How can we make it taste better? If we're talking about, a beverage or an edible, right, or a tincture, I think that's exciting to me. Something I'd like to see more of. I know, we're seeing a lot more tech, right, come into play, and whether, I'm supposed to log how I feel after I medicate. There are quite a few apps out there which are awesome that they're forward thinking like that. But I'd like to see it in more of a wearable, and maybe that's just me, and I get a little too comfortable after maybe a nice indica or something, but I just likely will not come back and enter, even if it's for my own benefit, so I know next time, and I'm someone that consumes quite a bit. I don't I don't see that being the way of the future, but the concept's there. So I'm wearing like an Apple Watch, right? So when I medicate, right, if my heartbeat does something, right, plus or minus, I'd like to know, right? And if that can be done, I mean, the technology is already there, and I do know of a couple of companies in our industry that are starting to incorporate these types of technology. And so that's what I would say I'm really excited about. I have jokingly say that, maybe we're going to see a vape pen that takes my temperature. And so I could pass it to you and you'll know that I'm COVID free, or a rapid COVID test that's also like a vape pen or something, maybe, and how it can bring us back to sort of passing and you had that talk with Danny Danko, right? And he was just like, sad, like a lot of us are, that like the circle's gone, the circle sesh. But maybe that's a way to bring it back. I don't know. I think we're also going to see a lot more on the industrial hemp side, and it's something that we haven't fully explored yet. As an industry, we saw the Farm Bill come through. I think just obviously THC might have been sexier, but I mean, industrial cannabis. Well, I mean, and industrial hemp, which is really the same thing. Industrial hemp has so many benefits that I'm really, really excited to see, and I can't imagine that that's not the way of the future, right? I can't see a future where industrial hemp is not playing a massive part and is a massive commodity. And so that's something I'm looking forward to and sort of planting our feet in a few different ways right now.
Cool. David, is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to speak on or mention before we shift gears into the coaching?
Yeah, so a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm assuming, are listening to the podcast. And a lot of times I get asked, is there like a piece of advice, you'd give them? And I've given some just through the podcast, right? But one in particular, and I hope no one takes this the wrong way, don't ask me to sign an NDA before we've had a phone call, right? And, just, I don't need to see anything proprietary, right? I just want to hear your voice. I just want to understand a little bit about, high level, who you are, and sure, I can look on your website and look on LinkedIn and I'll find those things out. But just, that intro call, get me excited a little bit before you ask me to sign an NDA. Because think about it, right? How many people, like you asked me, how many deals do we see, right? So in the thousands. Am I going to have my counsel, right, full-time looking at NDAs and making sure that we're not in violation of these NDAs? And it would be a full-time job, right? And that's just a waste of money, right? It's a waste. And again, I don't come from the finance industry, so again, I feel a little bit weird even saying this out loud. I've spoken with a couple of others in the cannabis industry, so I do feel a little bit, comfortable, and it gave me the courage to say it because they're saying the same thing too. When is the right time for an NDA? It's when we've expressed some serious interest in investing, and you've got something really proprietary that you're trying to protect. If that's not the case, man, just save it for as long as you can, because think how many people are not putting stumbling blocks in front of us, right? And that's what you want to do. You want to put a stumbling block. I mean, I had one company, I'm not going to say the name, but we're excited about looking into, and just because of COVID, it was like right at the beginning of COVID and the timing, he sent us an NDA and he really wanted it done. And, I've known the person for a while, and okay, you really want us to sign this NDA? Fine. I'm going to send it to the attorneys. And when it comes back, it comes back. And it took forever. And because of COVID, you never know what's going to happen, right? And he would call every few days, what's going on? When are we going to talk? I said, listen, I'm still trying to get your NDA signed. This is not my fault. We could have had that conversation. We could have been, deep into this already. And so that's really what I would suggest, is whether it's an NDA or anything else, just keep the stumbling blocks to a minimum.
I love that advice. I'm so happy you brought that up, actually, because it's a mistake that I've seen many beginner entrepreneurs make, where, they have this fear of, my big idea is going to get stolen or something. And it's like, first of all, most of the time there is zero proprietary information, and they're trying to, send out this NDA, which the bigger issue, second of all, is a David Hess isn't going to try to steal your idea. He's not interested in that, because he knows that ideas aren't really worth that much. It's all about the execution. And to your point, and I talk about this in the book a bit, is you have to understand as an entrepreneur what an investor's mindset is like. You know, they don't want to waste time on these administrative tasks. And they certainly don't appreciate, you know, if you're the one who's trying to get something from this investor and you're making things harder for them, you're really just shooting yourself in the foot. And
Exactly.
and by lacking that awareness, you're already kind of demonstrating to the potential investor that, hey, this person isn't seasoned, isn't serious, and probably not qualified, not worth much more of my time. Because investors, as I say in the book, you know, in theory, have an abundance of money. So their scarce resource is time. And they're going to be very, very diligent about how they spend their time. And if you, as much as give them a hint that you're wasting their time, you know, it's on to the next deal. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I would say do the opposite, right? Do the polar opposite. Give me 3 good reasons, right? Why you think Tress is the right fit for investment into your company, whether it's a convertible or you know, it's an equity round, whatever it may be. Why is Tress a good fit? And if you can start off the rapport that way, you're gonna get, you know, more yeses than no's, or that yes is going to come a lot sooner. And then now that I've said, you know, getting no's, and I think it's in the book as well. Don't burn that bridge, okay? And if you know who you are, you know, don't burn the bridge. There's really no point. We've said no on occasion and invested later on, right? Sometimes I'll say no and just to see, and it's not cruel. Like I said, I have to see if it's a culture fit. I want to see sometimes, you know, are they going to burn this bridge with me? Because it's kind of like, it's like a character trait. I'm not going to say flaw. It's a trait that you know, that expresses itself in other ways. And so, yeah, you know, just don't burn any bridges. And that doesn't mean, you know, we're going to be best friends. But there are a few companies out there that do a really great job of it, and they will send me their KPIs monthly, right? Monthly. They'll send me their KPIs, and we're getting close to thinking about potentially making an investment in them. And really what drove the you know, idea there was, you know, they do a really great job of keeping me updated. I don't want, you know, it's better than some portfolio companies, you know, used to, you know, you've gotten a lot better at it. But, you know, if you're sending me your KPIs and updates, and we did this month, we're going this month, every month, and I'm not even an investor, right? That's great. And that just shows me you're, you know, no grudges, you know, that I said no, you know, for a variety of reasons, right? A lot of it is about timing. I mean, timing is golden, right? And I still haven't figured that out. But I mean, timing is everything. How, why, I don't know, but timing is everything. And sometimes it's just poor timing, you know? Everything else might click. It's just poor timing. And so maybe next week is the right time. So just, yeah, don't burn that bridge. And you'll also likely get closer to a lot of yeses, or closer to that next yes from us or from others.
Absolutely. And this industry is way too small, especially the serious professional investors. You guys all know each other. And, you know, in case the people listening aren't aware of that, like,
more than know each other, we know each other, we communicate with each other, you know, through whether it's chat, phone calls. You know, we used to see each other more often because, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, maybe you're going to like a handful of these events. Some of, you know, the value add, I mean, think about just, you know, on your LinkedIn, who you see is speaking at these events. Some people are like speaking at every event. That means they're there, right? So, you know, they're running around. I mean, we're talking, and right now, if you're not talking live, I mean, we're doing it digitally, right? So yeah, we're collaborating. A lot of us are. There are some that, you know, they're by their nature, they want to, you know, go in their own direction, be on their own channel. That's also fine. But I've always felt for whatever it may be, that there's power in numbers and knowledge is power. And again, like we talked about and sort of touched on earlier, right? You want to be able to learn from everybody. That's really the way you truly amass knowledge.
Absolutely. And to your point earlier about, just being opportunistic and differentiating yourself by having that consistency and that professionalism of keeping you informed or keeping an investor informed of, hey, here's my progress month over month. Not only are you reminding them, hey, I'm here, I'm serious, I'm doing work, but it also creates the opportunity of maybe then David will make a connection of, oh, you know what, you guys should meet this person, or here's a collaboration, or here's a connection.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so there was one other thing I wanted to mention, and of course it slipped my mind. So, so I'm going to ask you instead about, you showed me a book that you had on your desk. I'm wondering what advice or resources do you have for people to just up their game and keep growing?
So this is the book, and I know you like to put links on for your listeners and followers, and we'll do that also. This is The Resilience Factor. Another good one is Entrepreneurial Transitions, Roy Caminero. You can see that one.
Nice.
And of course, there's that.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I like that book.
I don't know if you need to put the link on or if it's right there for that one, but we'll add the 2 links for the other 2. And it's really, resilience, like we were talking about earlier, is part of it is, I guess, in your one's DNA. But like anything else, one needs to nurture that, work on that. And for me, resilience, like I had said earlier, is almost part and parcel about like who I am and how I've always identified with my, because I had to, right? I'd get close, to something and then fall and have to get back up. I would be on the way to some place and get into an insane accident and be in the hospital for a month or 2. And, end of, a sports, a year, I used to play a lot of sports, and that would take me out of that year. Just whatever it may be, resilience was always the name of the game for myself. And, I'd seen it in grandparents that had gone through the Holocaust. I mean, grit and resilience are what get people further in life. And able just to get through life sometimes, right? And so those are kind of the books that I read when I get spare time. I also like to look at biographies and historic. I look at like historical fiction and whatnot, but certainly these days working on the resilience, definitely.
Amazing, awesome. So now, David, is the time that we shift into. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Actually, I will bring up just this quick momentary thing is when you hear no from an investor or just in general from anyone, no one likes to be rejected. And to the point about timing, that timing is such a huge factor. When you hear no, instead of no, hear it as not now, and just tell yourself, okay, it's right now it's a no, and maybe in the future it's a yes. And so don't jump to the conclusion that it's no and no forever. So just hear those no's as not nows, and don't let that discourage you. Instead, let it fuel you to improve and up your game, and to ask yourself, okay, how can I be opportunistic? How can I build this relationship? How can I demonstrate value? How can I keep in touch? How can I offer value? Because to let a relationship die at a no is to just demonstrate really short-sightedness and a lack of creativity. Because it's like, oh, if this one thing didn't work, then it's done. And that's just so short-sighted, especially in an industry that evolves so rapidly. So again, instead of hearing those no's and taking them as no, never, just think it's not now.
And learn, like you said, learn from those no's. Don't be shy, right? I mean, maybe not everybody's going to answer, but I would ask me why. Ask me why I said no, right? And ask me, were there any things you did like, right? And you're obviously speaking with me. That means you liked something. What were those things that you liked so that I could learn for my next pitch? Maybe, are you the wrong investor? Did I, am I in, a company that's, am I not as profitable as you needed me to be to fit into thesis? Are you heavy on a certain sector, and is that why? It's not necessarily because it's a bad company, and this has happened before, right? Where I've said no to a company, and I introduced them immediately to their investor, right? Because I knew it wasn't a fit for me, for Tress, but it was a fit for this other group. And so just ask, and just remember, I mean, we're not everybody, but at least Tress and a lot of us, and again, do a little bit of homework into the industry. You'll find out who these added value cannabis investors are in the groups. I know most of them, and for the most part, we'll answer that question, right? Maybe it'll be through email, not in a meet over the phone. But ask us why, man, and we'll be happy to explain. And like you said, keep that relationship going. That's what's important.
Absolutely. And to David's point, he said many times, what drives him is he wants to see the industry and the community succeed. And that's going to be true of pretty much everyone that you see on my podcast or in the book. And so you have to understand that in this industry, people want the good guys or good gals to prevail. And so, people want to help you. They want to see you succeed. So keep that in mind whenever you treat anyone or interact with anyone in any business capacity in cannabis, that they might not be your next partner or whatnot, but they can be your next ally, or they can give you the intro you need that's going to turn into, the explosive growth. So just keep that in mind. People here want to collaborate and support good operators and good actors.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. And so with that said, now we will switch gears and go into the coaching portion. And
right, hit it behind the stone here.
Yeah, there you go. Now, see, I need to hit that too, so we could be on the same page. But for the purposes of this show, we can we'll just roll with it. So, David, what is your biggest roadblock or challenge right now in business or in life?
Yeah, so I think I have a habit of spreading myself too thin. And I know I used to be like a Stephen Covey, groupie a little bit, and he talks about sharpening the blade. And I'm embarrassed to say that a lot of times I don't sharpen my blade enough, if that makes sense, right? To some of the listeners that don't understand what that is, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? If you have a blade, right, think of a kitchen knife, right? If you don't sharpen it, right, as your tool, if you're a chef, right, and you've got that kitchen knife, and you don't, they're sharpening it all the time. They're professionals, right? Now I'm kind of answering my own thing, right? There you go. It's good to talk it out, right? But when you don't, you aren't as effective. One isn't as effective, and I should know better, but I do find myself, for maybe a number of reasons, spreading myself just a little bit too thin, and I probably should do a better job of sharpening the blade.
So I'm hearing two different things, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think one thing is spreading yourself too thin, and then you're talking about sharpening the blade, which I'm understanding as like developing your own skills or knowledge, and maybe that's not how you're using it. So
that's actually interesting. I use it more as that, and it like we're talking about exercise, right? If you need to be a whole individual, health, everything, sleep, You know, and I'm not great at that. As I said, I used to reserve it for my flights, but now without flights, it's like, you know, what am I doing about sleep? So I need to get better at that. I know that a brain functions better, like, you know, with sleep, and now with COVID, I've been hyper aware of that. You know, I need to try and have, you know, better health, overall health, because that will, you know, keep my immune system up, and so I maybe take a few more cannabinoids for that, you know, just to keep the balance there, that homeostasis. But I shouldn't need to, right? I should also, you know, just get the actual sleep, and yeah. Does
So
that
then,
make sense?
yeah, that makes sense.
When
So
you're doing too much, right? and you think that, like, that's what's, you can almost do the same amount or more in less time if the blade is sharp. That's, so yeah, I hear that as well, like honing in on skills, and that also makes sense. But for me, I mean, I do that, and I hear that. But yeah, I was leaning more towards the way I was spreading myself too thin, usually go hand in hand, right? I don't give enough time for some other important things.
yeah,
And
yeah.
one thing, like I said, I put all my efforts into cannabis, you know, and like, it's almost like who I am, you know, 24/7. Is that good? You know, I don't know. That's kind of what I'm asking. Maybe I should be that, like, you know, 18/7, and I don't know, or you know, 16/7. I don't know.
So I'm hearing now that when you say you're spreading yourself too thin, it's really this dynamic of at the expense of potentially your self-care or your health care, and maybe, you know, the myth of work-life balance, that if you're working all the
Yes.
time, you know, good or bad, it is what it is. The judgment, however you want to judge it, is up to you. But if it's at the expense of taking care of yourself and your basic needs, you know, like sleep, for example, or exercise or diet, then ironically, that's gonna, the thing that you're like trying to avoid potentially, which is, you know, skipping a beat at work or whatnot, is gonna start happening.
Right. So like, yeah, exercise was certainly a part of that, right? And so I started walking or rollerblading my dog. Um, it was a little bit, I guess, scary at first with COVID, but you know, especially somebody that doesn't have the best immune system. So I was, at first I was a little bit, you know, apprehensive about going out, but as the numbers started getting better, you know, here in New York, and I would, you know, also do it kind of late at night, when no one was in the streets, and I mean, not too many people were just driving, that's for sure anyways, but certainly at that late at night no one was doing it. And you know, I would get some exercise that way, with my dog Callie. And but I, you know, I make sure I have 4 kids. My youngest is 8, and so I put him to bed every night. It's actually pretty cool. You know, obviously with a lot of travel, I missed out on a bunch of those nights, so I get to do that every night right now. But like, for example, like all my meals, right, are while I'm working, right? I mean, you know, again, I don't take like breaks, if that makes sense. My breaks are like, you know, putting my kid to bed, or, I mean, I guess that's a break, but it's not a, you know, it's not a restorative break, I guess, if that makes sense. Like I really should be.
So what would a restorative break look like for you?
Not answering emails, you know, not being a slave to the ding, you know. And I mean, I'm addicted. Like the second I hear something, I need to see what happened. There's some news feeds, right? Cannabis and outside of cannabis, but in particular cannabis. I want to be on top of everything. And so I guess I need to also allow myself, not like, it's okay if I'm not the first person to know something, right? I also enjoy sharing information. And so maybe that's part of it. If I, you know, I want to be early on to the information so that I can absorb it and share it. Maybe I don't need to do that all the time. Maybe
So
that doesn't need to be my responsibility all the time. You know.
yeah, David, let me ask you what is, because I'm hearing you talk about this lack of, what you called sharpening the blade. I'm actually thinking of more like what I'm hearing from you is more like recharging the batteries. And I'm wondering, because I heard you say sleep and restorative breaks and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm wondering, what is the lack of, this restorative time or blade sharpening? What is that costing you right now?
I don't know. It's costing me sleep, right? Hours of sleep. But I mean, what does that result in? I can make assumptions, right? That maybe I'd be more productive in the same amount of time. I could be more productive using the same assets if I had a little bit more sleep. Does that make sense?
What's in the way of you getting more sleep?
So like I said, there's so much information out there, whether it's, like I said, like when we talked about, I wasn't exaggerating when I say I'm looking and doing diligence on deals and taking the landscape of the cannabis industry in and notating it and everything. I mean, that's a lot, right? A lot. If you think about all the different sectors, right? All the different, biotech companies, all the different ad tech companies. You go through, there's literally like close to 100 subsectors, and, I want to understand how many investments have gone into a specific subsector. Well, for me, it's easier to see, right? When I have it in a spreadsheet a certain way. And I can say, oh, these, so-and-so made, X investment at this time into this particular company. And it really helps me understand the bigger picture of that sector. And then in general, maybe where people are, others in the industry are spending time investing, where I want to also be on the cap table. Like I said, a lot of times we're proactive and we'll make phone calls and say, hey, are you guys raising or can we support you in some other way, and getting to know the companies and just highlighting who and identifying who is doing what and that sort of thing. And so I get that, like, sometimes it's just too much and I need to be okay with the fact that, like, you can't, take it all in. It's impossible. It's I mean, if you think about it, there's a few hundred listed companies. If you're just focused on those listed companies and the SPACs and the MSOs and everybody, on the, first of all, there's different exchanges, right? But if you just focused on, let's say, those in North America, right? That's a full-time job, right? And that's like a little sliver of what I am attempting to do, on a daily basis. So, yeah. And we have other support. It's not, just David Hess doing it, but it's certainly David Hess leading the efforts and as we go forward, there's more automation of these things. And some of it is just, that's the nature of the beast, early on. A lot of it's manual until it can become automated, right? But yeah, maybe it's just that like I said, I want to be that person. I always enjoy, like, helping and sharing, and really, like I said, like, if I can do that, then that will increase, to me at least, it increases credibility to cannabis, and that's something, like I said, cannabis has been a part of, if you're wondering why that goes back, right? Cannabis has been a very, very large part of my life since I was 16, 17 years old, right? And early on, cannabis had zero credibility, okay? And so I knew it all along, right? And, I'm happy now that a lot of the, more of the mainstream is seeing it that way. It started off as the family members starting to see it that way, the parents, the grandparents, the uncles and aunts starting to be okay with it. Like I said, certain members were, but not everybody, up front. But then it slowly, once it started legalizing in California and other states, and then when Sanjay Gupta put out, Weeds, and I could start pointing to different YouTube videos and different, I could point out that in Israel they were doing clinical trials since also 96, and they've been studying it since the 60s, and the government is in favor of it, and just really trying to like help create this paradigm shift. It started, like I said, in my inner circle, and then slowly trying to put it out there into the world. Maybe I'm trying to do too much too quick. I don't, like I don't know when that says it. It's a marathon, not a race, And so, I mean, that helps. The more I tell myself that, is that, slow down. It's okay. It doesn't all have to happen today.
Right. And
that helps.
Yeah. So, David, let me ask you, what insights have you gotten just from talking this out a little? What's coming up for you as, you started with wanting to, you said, I feel overcommitted. I feel spread thin. I know when I feel spread thin, the fear that comes up for me is I'm going to fuck something up. I'm going to miss something. I'm juggling too many balls in the air. I'm going to drop one. And then, oh man, then then the fear starts telling me, then it's going to be downhill from there. I'm going to mess up not just one thing, I'm going to mess up a lot of things. Yeah. And then, so that's my experience. So you started with, I'm spread too thin. And then you told me that, you want to sharpen the blade, or maybe get some more rest, or there's a judgment perhaps that you feel like you should be getting more sleep. And now
Oh, I know I should be getting more sleep.
Yeah, so you that's great. So you should be getting more sleep. I'm curious, do you want to be getting more sleep?
That's a great question. Knowing and wanting, right? The difference between the two. Obviously not bad enough. My desire to accumulate, right, all that information and then share it is greater than the desire for wanting to get an extra 2-3 hours of sleep. I say to myself, you're good with 4-ish to 5 hours of sleep. Like, look, you just did it, for the past month or two, like, you're fine, like, you could deal like that. But then, like, I'll have like a 7-hour, and it'll be like, wow, I feel great, maybe I needed that, because like I say, I'm even weekends, it's just, this is who I am. I'm cannabis all the time.
I hear that. I get that. And
it's interesting. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, no, what do you think? Well, I'm curious.
Maybe I need to allow myself not to be cannabis all the time, but then like I said, like, it's just, I don't know. It just almost feels like it's part of my DNA, like everything about it. That.
I get that. And what's interesting to me, what I want to ask you is, sometimes our desires aren't in line with what our needs are, and vice versa. And so, maybe you don't desire getting more sleep enough, but maybe you need it. I don't know. It sounds like you don't know. Or maybe you do know, and you just really don't want to make a change, which is okay. I do think, however, I would strongly encourage you, and I don't know if you're taking like any days off or time off or whatever, but from everything I've studied about creativity and productivity and all that stuff and high performance, whether it's sports or whatever, we need recovery time. We need time away from whatever the craft is. That's where the creativity, that's why people have the insights in the shower or whatnot.
I used to, it's tougher in COVID, right? And that's a tougher challenge, ironically, right? For some people, this has been like the biggest vacation for good or for bad, right? For me, on the other hand, I used to go, and you might appreciate this, I think we're similar Eastern European backgrounds, every Thursday evening, right? I would sharpen my blade. And I would, when I was in town, and I would go to a banya, okay, which for some of your listeners is like, it's like a Russian bathhouse. Totally kosher. So if anyone's thinking else, it's not, right? It's a place where you go, you've got steam rooms, saunas, jacuzzis, cold, like igloo type, ice rooms. And I do go to, there's like a few Asian ones as well that are awesome. But like at the Russian banya, they would have these platza, these oak leaves, these birch leaves or oak leaves that you would just like basically, beat the crap out of yourself with, or someone would out of you, and just get all the toxins out. And for me, I did it Thursday night because I wanted to go into the weekend feeling, fresh, and just feeling like almost symbolically, like not like getting that crap out of me, and like going into the new week, fresh, have the weekend even to just for myself, and start the week whole. And since COVID, I mean, I remember the first time, and it was actually, it was one of the Asian ones that I would go to because they're open later. So, and they were doing some construction at the one I was going to in Brooklyn. And so I ended up at another one, and this is just when, news of COVID, coronavirus coming out of Wuhan, right, was starting to, penetrate, over here. And I'm looking at, my friend that I'd usually go with Thursday nights, and I said, is this the smartest thing that, I said, I'm looking around, I said, there must be better places than this, to be spending our time to chill, if we're not trying to catch COVID, like this is like a bathhouse, right? So we had to stop going, and then sure enough, like 2 days later, everything shut down. There was no choice. But it's a lot harder, right? Because I mean, that was every Thursday night. Like if I was in New York, that's where you would find me, right? For a few hours every Thursday night. Now, granted, while I was there, I was probably talking about cannabis or consuming cannabis. So still 24/7 cannabis, but in a different way, if that makes sense, right? And without with COVID, like I can't go there, right? I just ordered a hot tub for the backyard because I can't not have it. Working on the sauna and the birch. Maybe we'll plant an oak tree. But starting to build it out at home, because I can't not have some kind of an outlet, right? But that was there, and now with COVID, it's not. And also think about it. Every month there was an event, right? Pre-COVID, pre-Zoom, there was a live event, but it was every month, you could skip a few. And now that it's Zoom, right? If you say no to somebody, I mean, it's like, what do you mean no to a Zoom meeting? Where are you? If you're not home, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And so anytime, like I said, it's a global, if you're looking at this globally, I mean, it's at all hours of the day. And so it's harder with COVID, if that makes sense. Or maybe just we need to like all sort of maybe, the first couple of months of this was new, and we were all kind of like, all right, maybe we all have to Zoom and get the right background, and now that we're all like dialed in, I'll use a term, right, from the industry, we've got our Zooms dialed in, and our COVID lives dialed in. Do we need to like take a forced break? I mean, you mentioned vacation. My wife's birthday just passed, and like this time of year, we always took like a really great trip, right? I mean, like I said, I traveled a lot, and it's one of the ways that like, I'd sort of, in my head at least, make it up. We'd go on a nice vacation. We were in Puerto Rico last year. We were in Mexico the year before. Like, always going someplace really, really fun and spend some quality time together. We're not doing that this summer, right? And so not only, I mean, I need to make extra effort, right? To just find other times, and we do, luckily, and my wife's fine with it. Luckily, my wife medicates as well, and in fact, highly recommend it, as Jim Belushi does, for married people. It is, one of the best things that my wife and I do together. Is just, and nothing special. We could be watching TV. We're just medicating a little bit together, or a little bit more than a little bit. But it's just, it's the end of the day. It's before you go to bed, and it's just a way that we communicated. We've been married over 20 years now, and so that means obviously we met young. We actually met in high school, but it's just not being able to go on vacation, right? Should I turn my Zoom off for 2 weeks and just block it out and be like, no, every July, I go on vacation for 2 weeks, and just because the world is on Zoom 24/7 doesn't mean that I can't take a 2-week break. Any thoughts?
Yes. I do have some thoughts.
And you don't want to miss anything. Now it's like everybody is doing Zoom. There's some big thing on, some big webinar, every couple days now, right?
Yeah. It's funny because I'm I totally fit in the camp of people who are this quarantine was a vacation, even though I have an events company, and I was doing events and making money on events. I was man, I don't have to go to events. I don't have to do events. And frankly, I very intentionally isolated myself from, I'm not even going to go on Zooms for other people's stuff. I don't care. I'm going to take this time for me, because there might never be a time like this again where, everyone is stuck at home for an extended period of time. And for me, it was such a great opportunity to get the house in order, so to speak. And I started this podcast, which I love. And so, but anyway, my thought for you is, based on what I'm hearing, is, pre-COVID, in your routine, you would have at least maybe once a week or every other week time on an airplane, or twice a week time on an airplane to nap and catch up on rest that you're no longer getting.
Correct.
You had a Thursday night, going to Banya, which I love going to Banya. And, one thing I learned, about, maybe a year or so ago, kind of just, this is a side note about Banya, is that the First Nations people and many Native American tribes have their own kind of sweat lodge type experiences. And for them, part of, the heat and the quote unquote suffering of being in the high temperature is part of a purification process of going through that high heat and that suffering. Well, even though it's, to each his own, I think it's quite fun, but that's part of the purification and renewal. And it sounds like you had a very distinct renewal weekly ceremony. Yeah. So now we have two big things that you've indicated that are out of your COVID routine, that it sounds like.
That ceremony was done with a very good, one of my best friends.
Right.
We were doing it together, and he's not in cannabis. I mean, he'll medicate, right? So we, together.
Right, but it wasn't work.
It wasn't I didn't have to talk with him 24/7 about it either. And so also we don't see each other now, right? Every Thursday night.
Right. So now that's three big things that are out of your COVID routine, which it sounds like for the most part you're replacing with more work.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing very clearly is, and what I would recommend to you is, take back your Thursday night, or, one night a week at least, to, no meetings, no calls, no cell phone, whatever. And just for quality time, either whether that's with friends or by yourself, or even get on a Zoom with people just for fun, mm-hmm. Or do something for yourself that's going to be restorative, and that's going to be, without the pressure of having to perform in that professional capacity. And I think in doing so, you'll actually unlock more energy for all the professional pursuits. So that's what I'm hearing. And also, you could still take a vacation. There's, it's not quite the same, but it's possible. And then just one last thing, which I can relate to this, where there's this kind of pressure, or this story that you've told yourself of, I can't say no to Zoom calls or whatever because people know, we're quarantined. Like what? But that's kind of bullshit because the truth is you're in charge of your time.
Yeah.
And it's not only within your rights, right? But it's, I would say beyond that, you have an obligation to yourself to take care of yourself and your health. And if that means saying no to a Zoom call or a webinar or whatever, or not, being in every single opportunity, that's okay, right? Like there's more than enough stuff out there. And I'm based on what I've heard from you today, it sounds like you're doing a lot more than most people anyway. Like I think, taking a few hours off here and there isn't going to kill you.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So I want to ask you to make some kind of commitment, or is there an action that you can take to get some data on this issue of, maybe for the next month, here's what I'd propose is for the next month, because I think we're still going to be more or less in quarantine. The numbers are coming back up and, I'm not so optimistic that they're doing a good job out there, but anyway, maybe for the next month, you take back your Thursday night for something, a few hours Thursday night. What do you think?
I have that hot tub that should be delivered, right, for the backyard any day now. It was supposed to be in time for Father's Day. That's all right. But, we'll have a delayed, belated Father's Day chill. But it's, that will help. But yeah, I agree. And even if it doesn't come this week, I mean, that's a great idea. Just take back Thursday night, turn the phone off for a couple hours, and do anything but, right? I mean, what I would typically be doing. So take that back. Yeah, I could do that.
All right, awesome. And what do you think? I'm just curious. Let's make believe we're talking a month from now, and you did this. Let's say every Thursday night you took some time for yourself to just chill and hang out, relax. What do you think the impact of that would be if you were telling me a month from now, hey, Mike, I did it. I took the Thursday nights off. Here's what happened. What would that sound like?
So I think number one, it would be good because it would, like we had discussed earlier, right? It would sort of help me with, I want to, do something. I know I want to do something, and then I'm actually going to do it because I know it's beneficial for me. And just sort of going through that exercise, I think would be empowering. Similar to when I knew I needed to get more exercise, and then, okay, I'm going to start rollerblading more with my dog. And I did that and feel better, right? And it's not just the fact that I physically feel better. It's that I think the whole exercise was, I'm going to change that. And the fact that I've been doing it now consistently for, a month and a half, it feels really, really good. And there's that, 20 minutes or so that that's really when I'm not talking about cannabis, because it's to Cali, right? So, that I can sort of, parlay that feeling and into how I'm likely going to feel after doing that. I know I'll feel a lot much, especially with that hot tub, my body will feel better. But yeah, I think it's also not so much, you hit on something earlier, which, I never really thought so much about, but it's that the loss of that, it's real, right? Even the loss of that rebirth, just that re-energizing myself, in particular, at least for me in particular on Thursday night, I think would have ripple effects, good, positive ripple effects on other things. So I think that would be a noticeable change.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but after I go to Banya, I sleep like a baby.
Oh, that's when I get some good sleep. I'm up early, but yeah, definitely the quality sleep for sure.
Awesome.
For sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
David, what was your biggest insight from our conversation today?
The biggest insight? That's not just me. That doesn't, this whole NDA thing. It's my pet peeve. There are others. Just talking things out was good, right? Just, sometimes the more we talk about things, right? Sometimes we have the answers, right? We just need to talk about these with somebody that know how to, maybe ask the right questions. And so I, got that today. And had the importance of almost being in, if it sounds weird, but being in charge of my, my off duty time, and owning that, is okay. And just it being accepting the fact that A, it's not a marathon, and B, it doesn't, it's not being all done by me. I know there's thousands, literally thousands of fantastic, maybe hundreds of thousands, not maybe, there are hundreds of thousands of great people with great intentions in this industry that are also being excellent stewards. And so, I don't always have to be in the driver's seat when it comes to that. And, we're for the most part, we're in good hands, right? And I could be in the passenger seat for a little bit. And whether that means sleeping literally or figuratively, I think allowing myself to do more of that is okay. And maybe more than okay, is beneficial.
Awesome. And I'll just close out with, that's something I talk about in the book as well, as, self-care. It's often the first thing an entrepreneur will sacrifice for their business. There's the logic of, if I work more, if I work harder, things will go better in the business. And the step that people often skip is that when you're the operator and when the business depends on your ability or your performance, if you're not taking care of your health, then you're putting the whole business at risk. Because if you burn out, or if, anything happens because you weren't taking care of your health and giving yourself the breaks or the exercise or the diet or whatever it may be for the individual, then you're actually jeopardizing the business rather than working harder to do better. So, entrepreneurship is tough. Business is tough. Certainly combing through thousands of deals to find the right opportunities to build a legitimized and productive industry is tough. And, I think sometimes we forget that, and I know I can totally do this to myself. I have that voice in my head often that's, Mike, you're not working hard enough. Go work harder. What are you doing? You're a slacker. Don't be the lazy stoner, but the truth of it is, and I have to tell myself this often, is like, there's more to life than work. Yeah. And I didn't get into entrepreneurship to be working all the time. Although certainly, like you said, often the work feels fun. And so it's like, hey, why not work more? The reality is, though, that, all work and no play, that's not homeostasis. And so, to anyone listening, take care of yourself. You deserve it, especially if you're working hard, especially if you're pushing yourself. You got to take care of yourself. That's going to allow you to be more and to give more. And so don't neglect that step. And it's easy to neglect. So you got to watch it. You have to be intentional about scheduling that recharge time, because it's so easy to just say yes to, every other demand on your time and forget to say yes to the core basic maintenance, if you will. So
exactly.
Yeah. David, thank you so much, man. I try. Every now and then I'm good for something.
Really appreciate it.
David, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and you being able to share your story and your insights and wisdom. And I just want to encourage you to keep up the good work, and send my regards to Asher. Well, we got to get him in here soon too and put him on the hot seat. I would love that.
Definitely. We'd love to see that.
Awesome. David, thank you so much, man. Be well. And hopefully in the near future, I'll see you at Banya once that's safe.
That's a date.
Awesome, man. Be well, brother.
Thank you very much. You too.
Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is the cannabis business coach. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is
the cannabis business coach.